What I'm about to tell you will shatter everything you think you know about women and relationships. Carl Jung discovered a truth so uncomfortable that most men spend their entire lives refusing to face it. You think she loves you for who you are? Think again. With the sharp surgical precision of a man who spent his life staring into the psychological abyss of the human soul, Carl Jung's entire life was devoted to mapping what he called the unconscious, the part of the human mind that operates silently beneath your awareness, and he discovered something terrifying about women. He discovered that they don't just fall in love with men, they fall in love with the idea of men, with the fantasy, with the projection, and the scariest part, most of them don't even realize they're doing it. Let me put this plainly. You might think she's choosing you, but what she's actually choosing is the version of you she's created in her own mind, a psychological puppet who exists to play a role in her private movie. And when you stop fitting that role, well, we'll get to that. Jung wasn't just another psychologist with some theories. He spent decades peeling back the layers of the human mind. He discovered that women carry around an internal masculine image. He called it the animus. And they project this image onto men like a movie projector beaming onto a blank screen. That screen, that's you. You're not being seen, you're being measured against an invisible man who's lived in her mind since childhood. Think about it. Ever had a woman tell you, "I thought you were different," when you haven't changed at all? Ever feel like you're constantly trying to hit a moving target, like no matter what you do, it's somehow never what she actually wanted? That's not you failing, that's her animus projection at work. From the moment she lays eyes on you, you're not just dealing with the woman standing in front of you, you're dealing with her father issues, every man who ever hurt her, every movie hero she fell in love with, and every cultural idea about what a real man should be, all rolled into one powerful unconscious force. That magical feeling at the beginning of relationships, when everything clicks and she seems to adore you, that's not really about you. You just happen to match her projection, for now. She doesn't see you. She sees potential, and potential is just another word for not good enough as you are. Here's what Jung discovered, and it's brutal. Women don't fall in love with you. They fall in love with what you represent in their unconscious. The masterpiece she thinks she sees in you? It isn't you. It never was. It's like you're an actor who showed up for a movie, but she already wrote the script, designed your costume, and decided your character's fate long before you arrived on set. You're just expected to play along. When she suddenly gets angry over something small, when her reactions make no sense, when her expectations seem impossible, you're experiencing the gap between the real you and the character she's created in her mind. Let's be clear, this isn't about blaming women. Men do similar things, but there's something uniquely powerful about the way women's animus projections work. Jung noticed that most women develop their emotional side first, so their animus, their inner masculine, often shows up as what they lack: logic, authority, strength, mastery. That's why so many women are drawn to men who seem powerful in some way, whether physically, intellectually, or socially. When a woman says, "You have so much potential," watch out. She's not seeing your potential, she's seeing her animus's potential, using you as its canvas. This explains why so many relationships start hot but crash and burn. At first, you're bathed in golden light. You seem to match her unconscious ideal. But as the real you starts showing through the cracks, things get ugly. And here's the sick part. The more you try to shape yourself into her ideal, the less authentic you become. The less authentic you become, the less satisfying the relationship feels to both of you. You're exhausting yourself trying to be someone you're not. And deep down, she senses the fakeness. Jung discovered something that explains so much about why women sometimes act in ways that make absolutely no sense to men. He found that when a woman's animus, her inner masculine, isn't developed properly, it becomes a psychological tyrant inside her mind. This tyrannical animus judges without mercy. It creates impossible standards. It speaks in absolutes. Sound familiar? You never listen to me. You always let me down. All men are the same. These aren't just complaints. They're literally her undeveloped animus speaking through her mouth, measuring you against a perfect man fantasy that no human could possibly live up to. Jung broke down the animus development into 4 stages, and most women get stuck somewhere along the way. Stage 1 is the most basic, pure physical power. This is why some women are drawn to athletes or physically imposing men. The emotional connection isn't the point. It's about the raw masculine energy. Stage 2 is about action and initiative, the guy who makes things happen, who has drive and ambition. This is why potential is such a loaded word in relationships. Stage 3 is the man of words and ideas, the intellectual, the speaker, the guy who seems to have all the answers. Stage 4 is true wisdom, the rare, fully developed animus that's about genuine understanding rather than power, force, or mere knowledge. Here's the problem. Most women never develop their animus past the early stages. Instead of owning this part of themselves, they project it outward, looking for men to embody it for them. When her animus is undeveloped, it doesn't serve her, it possesses her. Ever been in an argument where suddenly she seems like a completely different person? Where her eyes look different, her voice changes, and she starts making these cutting, absolute statements. That's not just anger, that's her unconscious animus taking over. When you stop playing the role her animus assigned you, she doesn't rethink the role, she recasts the actor. This is why so many women date the same type of man over and over, even though it never works out. The script stays the same, only the poor guy trying to perform it changes. The painful truth is this: by trying to be her hero, by trying to fit her unconscious script, you give up who you really are. And a relationship without authenticity is just 2 people lying to each other, connecting with fantasies instead of real human beings. So what happens when the fantasy finally falls apart? When she realizes you're not the hero in her mental movie? When the projection collapses, you're left confused, betrayed, and humiliated. But here's the hard truth most men aren't ready to face. You participated in this whole thing. You allowed yourself to be her psychological canvas. You played along with the role she assigned you. You didn't do anything wrong. You just stopped being a convincing actor in someone else's play. The rejection you feel isn't about who you truly are. It's about who you pretended to be. Think about your last breakup. How much of yourself did you hide to keep her happy? How often did you swallow your real thoughts and feelings? How exhausting was it to constantly monitor yourself, filtering out any parts of you that might upset her fantasy? This is what destroys men in relationships. It's not just about getting dumped. It's about slowly erasing yourself throughout the entire relationship. Ever felt like you were walking on eggshells around a woman? What you're really describing is the stress of carrying someone else's unconscious projection. One authentic moment, one glimpse of the real you that doesn't match her fantasy, and the whole house of cards comes crashing down. After these relationships end, men often say they lost themselves. That's exactly what happened. The real you got buried under layers of performance. The worst part? Most guys never break this pattern. They just move from one relationship to another, getting idealized at the start, then facing disappointment as the real them starts showing through, then getting dumped when they can no longer maintain the act. Rinse and repeat, with the same psychological blind spots intact. Some guys blame themselves. If only I'd been better, stronger, richer, more this, more that. But that misses the whole point. The problem wasn't that you weren't enough. It's that you were trying to be someone else entirely. The most gut-wrenching moment is when you realize she never actually saw you. The woman who supposedly knew you best was actually in a relationship with a ghost from her unconscious mind. You were just the body she hung it on. That realization can break something deep inside a man. Jung didn't just identify this problem, he offered a solution. But it's not an easy one. He called it individuation, the tough, often lonely journey toward becoming psychologically whole and independent. You don't become a man by being chosen by a woman. You become a man by choosing yourself. Individuation isn't some pretty self-help concept. It's brutal work. It means facing your shadow, all the parts of yourself you've been running from. It means integrating the masculine and feminine aspects of your psyche instead of looking for a woman to complete you. It means building a relationship with your own unconscious rather than being blindly driven by it. It means becoming the author of your own story instead of being a character in someone else's. What does this actually look like in real life? First, you need to develop serious self-awareness. Learn to spot the difference between your authentic self and the masks you wear to get approval. Ask yourself, how much of what I do is because I genuinely want to do it, versus doing it to avoid disapproval? How much of my identity is built around being what women want, rather than being who I really am? Second, you need to face your shadow, the rejected, repressed parts of yourself. Your shadow isn't just your dark side. It often contains your power, your boundaries, and your ability to stand up for yourself. When you reclaim these parts, you're much less likely to surrender your identity for female approval. Third, you need to integrate your own inner feminine, what Jung called the anima. Men who haven't come to terms with their anima often become psychologically dependent on women. They try to find wholeness through relationships, rather than bringing wholeness to their relationships. Fourth, you need to develop a relationship with your unconscious mind. This could be through practices like active imagination, analyzing your dreams, or deep meditation, learning to recognize and integrate the unconscious material that's running your life without you knowing it. Fifth, you need to build a life of meaning that doesn't depend on female validation. What do you value? What matters to you beyond being chosen as a partner? What would you dedicate your life to even if no woman ever approved? This isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming real. It's about developing psychological integrity, where your outer life matches your inner truth. A man on the path of individuation becomes harder to project onto. The more psychologically defined you become, the less you function as a blank screen for others' unconscious material. You have too much substance, too much self-definition to be a convenient projection screen. This doesn't mean you become rigid or closed off. Actually, the opposite happens. True individuation leads to greater openness and genuine connection, but connection based on reality rather than fantasy, on seeing and being seen rather than projecting and being projected upon. Here's the twist that most men miss completely. When you desperately want her approval, when you're trying so hard to be what she wants, you're actually reinforcing your role as her psychological canvas. Your neediness broadcasts that you're incomplete, that you need her projection to feel whole. Let's be brutally honest, you fear being alone more than you fear being fake. But here's where Jung's insight gets really interesting. When you do the hard work of individuation, when you become psychologically complete within yourself, something unexpected happens. You no longer need her projection, and paradoxically, that's exactly what makes you genuinely attractive rather than temporarily appealing. A complete man attracts, a needy man repels. This is the dark truth Jung discovered that most men refuse to accept. Let's dig deeper into this paradox. When you're psychologically incomplete, when you haven't faced your shadow or reconciled with your inner feminine, you unconsciously seek completion through women. You want a woman to make you feel whole, to validate parts of yourself you can't validate internally. This creates a psychological vacuum that actually sucks projections toward you. Your undefined psychological spaces become perfect landing spots for her animus projection. At first, this feels like amazing compatibility, like you're perfectly matched, but it's not real connection. It's mutual unconsciousness creating an illusion of connection. Most romantic attraction works this way. It's not random that the people we're most intensely attracted to are often those who trigger our unresolved psychological stuff. The intensity we mistake for compatibility is often just the electric charge of unconscious projection. But a man who's done the work of individuation becomes psychologically self-contained. He's still open to connection, but he's not looking for psychological completion through it. He's cultivated wholeness within himself. This wholeness shows up as a paradoxical combination: strong boundaries but genuine openness, self-sufficiency but capacity for real intimacy, confidence without arrogance, vulnerability without neediness. Women pick up on this difference instantly. A man who needs nothing from them psychologically, who isn't trying to extract validation or completion, is inherently more attractive than a man who approaches relationship from psychological hunger. The individuated man doesn't try to be attractive. He's not performing to get approval or twisting himself to match some imagined ideal. He simply is who he is, defined, integrated, authentic. And this solid psychological presence naturally draws people toward him. But here's the final twist in the paradox. Once you no longer need the approval, the projection, or even the relationship to feel complete, once you've done the internal work of individuation, you no longer experience rejection as devastating. You recognize that someone else's inability to see you clearly is about their psychological limitations, not your value. You become essentially rejection-proof, not because everyone accepts you, but because your sense of self no longer depends on being accepted. Listen carefully. You are not a victim in this psychological game. You are a volunteer. Every time you compromise who you really are for female approval, every time you hide your authentic self to keep the peace, you volunteer to be the canvas for someone else's projection. The path of individuation is solitary, terribly solitary, but it's the only path to freedom. Jung wasn't just describing psychology, he was throwing you a lifeline, the chance to stop being the puppet and become the puppeteer of your own life. The uncomfortable truth isn't that women project, it's that you've allowed it, and the time to wake up is now. This awakening takes serious courage. It means facing the emptiness of self-definition, the terrifying freedom of deciding your own values, meaning, and purpose without outsourcing that responsibility to female approval. Most men never take this step. They stay psychologically like teenagers, defining themselves through external validation, especially female validation. They would rather be loved for who they're not than risk not being loved for who they are. But really think about the cost of continuing this way. Think about the spiritual and psychological damage of living a fake life, of abandoning yourself to be accepted by others. Think about the profound loneliness of being in relationships where the real you is never actually seen, where the authentic you stays hidden behind the performance. Jung wrote that the second half of life is when the task shifts from establishing yourself in the world to finding your soul. Many men never make this transition. They keep chasing external achievements and validation, wondering why success and relationships never bring the fulfillment they expected. That's because nothing external can fix an internal problem. No amount of female approval can make up for your lack of self-approval. No relationship can make you whole if you haven't done the work of individuation. The wake-up call is this. You can spend your entire life seeking validation through relationship, achievement, or status, being a canvas for others' projections. Or you can embark on the solitary, difficult, but ultimately rewarding journey of becoming who you truly are. No one can make this choice for you. No one can walk this path for you. The decision to wake up, to prioritize psychological integrity over external approval, has to come from within you. Call to action with expanded meaning. You are not a victim. You are a volunteer in this psychological dynamic. Every time you compromise your authenticity for approval, you volunteer to be the canvas for someone else's projection. The path of individuation is solitary, terribly solitary, but it's the only path to freedom. Jung wasn't just describing psychology, he was offering liberation, the opportunity to stop being the puppet and become the puppeteer of your own life. The uncomfortable truth isn't that women project, it's that you've allowed it, and the time to wake up is now. This awakening requires courage. It means facing the void of self-definition, the terrifying freedom of determining your own values, meaning and purpose without outsourcing that responsibility to others' approval. Most men never take this step. They remain psychologically adolescent, defining themselves through external validation, particularly female validation. They would rather be loved for who they're not than risk not being loved for who they are. But consider the cost of continuing this way. Consider the spiritual and psychological toll of living an inauthentic life, of abandoning yourself to be accepted by others. Consider the profound loneliness of being in relationships where you are never truly seen, where the real you remains hidden behind the performance. Jung wrote about the second half of life as the time when the task shifts from establishing yourself in the world to finding your soul. Many men never make this transition. They continue pursuing external achievements and validation, wondering why success and relationship never bring the fulfillment they expected. That's because nothing external can resolve an internal deficit. No amount of female approval can compensate for your lack of self-approval. No relationship can make you whole if you haven't done the work of individuation. The wake-up call is this: you can spend your entire life seeking validation through relationship, achievement, or status, being a canvas for others' projections, or you can embark on the solitary, difficult, rewarding journey of becoming who you truly are. No one can make this choice for you. No one can walk this path for you. The decision to awaken, to prioritize psychological integrity over external approval, must come from within. Individuation doesn't guarantee you better relationships with women. What it guarantees is a better relationship with yourself. And from that foundation, everything else changes. This is Carl Jung's dark truth most men refuse to accept. You cannot be loved for who you are until you know who you are. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This isn't just some poetic line, it's a psychological necessity. To give up this privilege, to live as someone else's projection screen instead of as your authentic self, is to waste the one life you've been given. Think about this. What would your relationships look like if you entered them from a position of wholeness rather than neediness? What would change if you valued your psychological integrity more than female validation? How differently would you move through the world if you were the author of your life rather than a character in someone else's story? The path of individuation doesn't promise constant happiness or an easy life. It promises something far more valuable: authenticity, integrity, and genuine meaning. The ability to stand firmly in the center of your own life, defined by your own values rather than others' projections. Jung understood that this journey isn't just personal, it's how humans evolve collectively. Each man who does the work of genuine psychological development contributes to the evolution of consciousness itself. So the question isn't just about improving your relationships with women, it's about your fundamental orientation to life itself. Will you continue existing as a reflection of others' expectations, or will you accept the challenge of becoming who you truly are? This is your awakening, if you're brave enough to accept it. Are you ready to begin?